Imagine this. Entire cities carved in stone, vast temples rising above the jungle canopy, marketplaces filled with voices, laughter, trade, and ritual, and then so on. No war, no trace of fire, no clear explanation, just disappearance. Civilizations that once thrived, now reduced to ruins and whispers. This is not myth. These were real people, real societies, builders, astronomers, traders, kings, and farmers vanishing as if the earth itself swallowed them whole. Tonight, we step into that silence. Sit back, relax, and allow your mind to wander into the realms of forgotten history. From the rain-soaked temples of Cambodia to the windswept cliffs of North America, we'll trace the echoes of civilizations that rose with brilliance and then vanished into air. As we move through these stories, remember, what you hear is not final truth. Some explanations are carved into stone, others are only theories, and yet each carries its own sense of mystery, its own unanswered questions. What makes a people vanish? Was it famine, war, climate, or something more elusive, an invisible force that time itself refuses to reveal? Tonight, we are not seeking conclusions, we are seeking wonder. The kind of wonder that makes the ruins of Angkor feel alive when the jungle breathes through their stone corridors, or the abandoned houses of Roanoke ache with the weight of unfinished stories. These are not just relics, they are reminders. Reminders that human history is not a straight line, but a fragile web, and when one strand breaks, the whole design can collapse. And yet, even in disappearance, these civilizations left behind signs, enigmatic statues, abandoned cities, and scattered bones that dare us to imagine. In this journey, we will explore the Khmer Empire, the Anasazi, Easter Island, the Indus Valley, and many more. Civilizations whose names linger like half-remembered dreams. But we will not ask simply how they vanished. We will ask something deeper. Why do we continue to be haunted by their absence? As the night unfolds, each story will draw you further into a labyrinth of human triumph and human fragility. And with every civilization, one thought will return again and again. If they could vanish, what does that mean for us? Let's begin. Our first mystery awaits deep within the jungles of Southeast Asia, where the Khmer Empire once ruled a kingdom of water, stone, and forgotten gods. In the damp heart of Cambodia, swallowed by thick jungle and guarded by trees whose roots coil like serpents, lies the ghost of an empire. The Khmer civilization, once a superpower of Southeast Asia, did not merely build a city, they built a vision in stone. Angkor was its crown jewel, a city of colossal temples, sacred lakes, and reservoirs so vast that from the sky they mirrored the constellations. Imagine walking its causeways 1,000 years ago, priests chanting in Sanskrit, courtiers dressed in silks, warriors sharpening blades of bronze. It was not a hidden kingdom, but a radiant one, attracting traders, pilgrims, and emissaries from distant lands, and yet it disappeared. The empire, at its height, controlled lands stretching across modern Cambodia, Thailand, Laos, and Vietnam. It was a world sustained by water canals, moats, and reservoirs that turned monsoon rains into lifelines. Angkor Wat itself, with its towers shaped like lotus buds, was not only a temple but a cosmological map, aligning heaven and earth in sandstone precision. But even perfection is fragile. The jungle whispers of collapse. Some scholars suggest climate shifts brought erratic floods and devastating droughts, overwhelming the delicate water system. Others point to political fractures, royal rivalries, invasions, or the rise of neighboring kingdoms. There are even hints of disease that swept through villages, thinning the empire from within. Yet none of these theories explain the totality of silence. One day Angkor was the beating heart of an empire. The next, it was reclaimed by vines, as if nature itself staged a quiet conquest. Imagine the Khitan Empire, too great to fall, slowly being swallowed, its temples sinking into green shadows, its roads disappearing beneath roots. And the people, where did they go? Did they scatter into smaller kingdoms, blending into villages we now overlook? Or did they leave willingly, abandoning stone for survival? We can only wonder. What remains is haunting. Corridors lined with bas-reliefs depicting gods and demons locked in eternal struggle. Towers carved with enigmatic smiles, their gaze unchanged even as centuries passed. The Khmer Empire reminds us that water, stone, and power are never permanent. They shift, they vanish, they return to silence. And so Angkor stands today, not as a living kingdom, but as a question mark carved in sandstone. As we step deeper into this mystery, the silence of Angkor invites us to ask, how does a civilization so vast, so advanced, dissolve into air without leaving an answer? Walk the silent halls of Angkor Wat today, and you'll notice something unsettling. The walls speak, not in words, but in carvings. Thousands of figures are etched into the stone, each line cut by hands that lived 1,000 years ago. Warriors locked in battle, celestial dancers frozen mid-step, gods towering above mortals. The sheer scale is staggering. Angkor Wat covers more ground than modern cities, its moat wider than a river. Yet behind this magnificence lies the puzzle of impermanence. Why build something meant to last forever, only to abandon it? The architecture was more than beauty, it was a system of belief, a world built to mirror the cosmos. Towers represented Mount Meru, the mythic center of the universe. Reservoirs reflected the oceans. Angkor was a temple city designed not just for kings, but for gods. Standing beneath its towering spires, you feel both dwarfed and uplifted, as though time itself bends around the sandstone. But perhaps therein lies the tragedy. For when belief systems fracture, when power shifts, temples no longer serve their purpose. Some researchers suggest the Khmer's decline wasn't sudden at all, it was gradual erosion, not collapse. Imagine canals clogging with silt, harvests growing thin, families abandoning stone palaces for farmland where survival outweighed grandeur. In this telling, Angkor didn't vanish, it simply faded, like the slow dimming of a flame. Yet the silence of the ruins says otherwise. They do not feel faded, they feel abandoned. Walk alone among the banyan trees that strangle the temples, their roots splitting stone as if to reclaim it. You will not feel gentle decline. You will feel sudden absence, as though one day the people simply left. And so, each wall, each pillar becomes a riddle. Were these carvings left behind as warnings, as offerings, or as nothing more than the quiet artistry of a civilization that never imagined it would end? That is the haunting beauty of the Khmer Empire. Its architecture isn't just a monument, it's a ghost. And every step you take across its flagstones is a reminder. Something this magnificent should not disappear. Yet it did. Which leads us to the question that lingers. If Angkor was abandoned, where did the Khmer people go, and why does history refuse to answer? The Khmer Empire does not end in blood or conquest or fire. It ends in silence. Unlike Rome, which left volumes of records, or the Maya, who carved their histories into stone, the Khmer left gaps. Silence is perhaps the greatest mystery of all. Angkor itself was rediscovered by Europeans in the 19th century, hidden beneath a canopy of green, its towers rising like a forgotten cathedral. Explorers spoke of their awe and disbelief. How could a city so vast be swallowed by jungle and memory? Some suggest the empire's people were absorbed into smaller kingdoms, merging into Cambodia's later history. Others argue droughts lasting decades crippled the agriculture, leaving Angkor's sophisticated water system dry and useless. Still others point to invasion Thai and Kham armies that tested Angkor's strength until it cracked. And then there are theories darker still: disease sweeping through villages, curses invoked by abandoned gods, or perhaps some shift in the unseen rhythms of nature. The truth is, no one knows, and that is the real power of the Khmer mystery. Imagine standing in Angkor Thom, once the bustling capital. Elephants marched its roads, soldiers guarded its gates, and children ran through its courtyards. Now, silence. Birds circle its towers, moss coats its stones, and the sound of your footsteps is the loudest thing for miles. It feels less like a ruin and more like a stage where the actors never returned. The Khmer Empire did not vanish completely. Its descendants live on in modern Cambodia, but its greatness dissolved. It became myth and riddle, swallowed by time. And so, Angkor leaves us with a question, not just of history, but of fate. What does it mean for something so immense, so radiant, to vanish? And if such a thing can happen once, could it happen again? Civilizations rise on water, trade, and belief. But when those pillars collapse, they leave behind echoes. The Khmer are one such echo, carved in stone and cloaked in silence. And now, from the jungles of Cambodia, we move across the world to another mystery. This time, to the red cliffs and deserts of the American Southwest, where a people called the ancestral Pueblos, or the Anasazi built cities in stone, only to vanish, leaving their dwellings empty against the canyon walls. High in the mesas and canyons of the American Southwest, the sun burns against red rock, and shadows stretch long across cliffs that feel older than memory. Here, carved into the face of sheer stone, lie the silent cities of a people we call the ancestral Pueblos, or the Anasazi. Imagine standing before these dwellings, rooms stacked like honeycombs, ladders reaching upward toward the cliff face, plazas arranged for ritual and trade. The architecture is not random. It is intentional, mathematical, spiritual. Chaco Canyon, for example, was no simple village. It was a hub, a ceremonial center aligned with the movements of the sun and stars. Its great houses rose with hundreds of rooms, built with stone precision, their doorways framing solstices, as if time itself were invited to live among the people. The Anasazi were not wanderers. They were builders, astronomers, farmers coaxing maize from arid soil, and artists leaving behind petroglyph spirals. Animals, figures that still watch us from the canyon walls. Yet, despite this brilliance, the story ends in mystery. By the late 13th century, the cities were empty. Entire cliff dwellings abandoned, their fires gone cold. Pots left unfinished, kivas sealed, ladders missing. No final battle recorded. No mass graves unearthed. Just absence. Some scholars point to drought, a centuries-long dry spell that turned fertile land to dust and forced migrations. Others believe conflict trades, warfare, or social unrest fractured the fragile bonds of these communities. But when you stand in the silence of Mesa Verde or Chaco, the mystery feels heavier than any single explanation. The air itself whispers of something greater, something we cannot see. Imagine the sound of wind through the canyon. Imagine hundreds of families, one by one, leaving their homes in search of water, food, survival. Did they believe they would return? Did they know they were closing the door on centuries of tradition? What remains today is both haunting and beautiful. Stone dwellings clinging to cliffs, stairways carved into sheer rock, and a silence so deep it feels eternal. The Anasazi remind us that human strength is fragile against the scale of time. We build in stone, and yet even stone cannot guarantee permanence. Their homes still stand, but the people are gone. And so, the canyon walls ask us a question. Where did they go? If you visit Chaco Canyon at dusk, you'll see the sky bleed with color orange fading to violet, stars emerging like sparks from another age. In those moments, the ruins feel alive. You can almost hear drums echoing across the desert, footsteps gathering for ceremony, the crackle of fire against the chill. But look closer, and you'll realize these are not living cities. They are monuments to something lost. The canyon walls bear petroglyphs of spirals, serpents, and celestial alignments. Some researchers believe they mapped the heavens, marking solstices and eclipses. Others suggest they were messages, warnings, prophecies, or symbols of spiritual journeys. Yet the meanings have slipped away, leaving us to guess. This silence is the essence of the Anasazi mystery. Archaeologists have found signs of abrupt departure, food stores left behind, tools abandoned, structures sealed. It wasn't the slow drift of a dying culture. It feels sudden, deliberate, final. Some theories grow darker. Evidence of cannibalism has been uncovered in a few sites fractured. Bones burned, marrows suggesting survival at the edge of desperation. Was famine so severe that neighbors turned against neighbors? Or were these acts ritualistic, a collapse of order into chaos? Others whisper of migrations that carried the people away, blending them into descendant communities we now know as the Hopi, Zuni, and other Pueblo tribes. But even these descendants look back on Chaco and Mesa Verde with reverence, sometimes with caution, as if those places hold a weight beyond history. Walk through a cliff dwelling today, and the silence feels heavy, almost watchful. The walls seem to absorb your footsteps, and the air feels older than you can bear. These cities were not just homes, they were statements, proof that humanity could thrive in impossible places, carving civilization into stone. Yet here, we see that even stone cannot outlast mystery. And so, as the stars rise above the canyon, we are left with a question. Why would a people who built their lives so precisely into the rhythm of the land and sky abandon it all? The disappearance of the Anasazi lingers because it is not complete. Their dwellings still stand. Their symbols still mark the rock. Their descendants still carry fragments of their traditions. Yet, something is broken. The continuity of a people, the thread that ties past to present, was severed, and it is this rupture that haunts us. Some archaeologists argue that migration is the answer, that the Anasazi did not vanish, but scattered, joining other communities and evolving into new cultural identities. But the ruins left behind don't feel like a gentle migration. They feel like an ending. Imagine living in a cliff dwelling, firelight casting shadows on stone walls, knowing that the last ember will soon fade, and no one will return to relight it. That is the sense you feel when standing inside these places today. The silence is not ordinary, it is layered. It feels like a memory too heavy for words. Perhaps the greatest mystery is not how they vanished, but why we feel their absence so deeply. Why do empty dwellings stir something in us, something we can't explain? Maybe it is because they remind us of our own fragility. We, too, build in stone. We, too, think our cities will last forever. Yet the Anasazi show us that time erases even the most enduring walls. And still, in their disappearance, they left a mark in the stone, in the land, and in the imagination of those who walk where they once lived. The Anasazi did not just vanish. They became silence itself, a silence that stares back at us from the canyon walls. And now, from the deserts of the southwest, we journey far into the Pacific, to a remote island dotted with colossal statues, a place where stone faces gaze endlessly toward the horizon, and the mystery of disappearance takes on yet another form. Welcome to Easter Island. Far out in the Pacific Ocean, a speck of land rises from endless waves, a place so remote it feels like the end of the world. Easter Island, or Rapa Nui, is small, windswept, and solitary, and yet on this isolated island stand hundreds of colossal statues, the Moa stone faces staring inland, watching, waiting. Their presence is overwhelming. Each statue weighs tons, carved from volcanic rock, some taller than a house. They line the coasts, positioned as though guarding the island, all witnessing something beyond human understanding. But the mystery is not only the statues, it is the people who carved them. The Rapa Nui civilization transformed this isolated land into a thriving society, capable of feats that baffle us even today. Imagine the sound of chisels against stone, the creak of wooden rollers, the chants of workers as they moved these giants across the island. How did they manage it, without metal tools, without draft animals, on a tiny island surrounded by nothing but ocean? And more haunting still, why did it end? By the time Europeans arrived in the 18th century, the island was stripped of trees, its population dwindled, its monuments half buried or toppled. What happened here? Some suggest ecological collapse. The people, in their ambition, cut down every tree to move their moai, leaving the land barren, unable to sustain crops or provide timber for fishing canoes. Others believe warfare tore the society apart, rival clans toppling one another's statues in cycles of destruction. And then there are whispers of something deeper, disease carried by foreign ships, slave raids, or perhaps a cultural shift that made the moai meaningless. Today, walking among these stone giants, you feel the weight of their silence. They do not answer. They only watch, unblinking, as though they alone remember. Easter Island is not just a mystery of how a society rose and fell, it is a question of why. Why build so much in a place so small? Why invest all labor into monuments rather than survival? Perhaps the moai were more than statues. Perhaps they were anchors for belief, for memory, for power. And when belief faltered, the civilization followed. The moai still stand, but the people who gave them meaning are gone. Step into the heart of Rapa Nui, and you will see the scars of collapse etched into the land itself. The soil is thin, the hills bare. Once, this island was covered in forests towering, palms that sheltered birds and offered wood for canoes, houses, and the great moving of statues. But when the last tree fell, something shifted forever. Without trees, the island could not sustain its people. Without canoes, fishing declined. Without fertile land, famine crept in. Scholars describe it as ecological suicide, a warning carved into history. Yet, was it truly suicide or survival gone wrong? Perhaps the Rapa Nui people did not see the danger until it was too late. Perhaps the building of Maui was not vanity, but desperation, prayers in stone for abundance, for gods to restore balance. Some archaeologists believe rival clans, once united by shared belief, turned against each other when resources dwindled. They toppled statues, destroyed fields, and fought for survival in a world shrinking by the year. Others point to European arrival as the final blow. Ships brought disease, foreign weapons, and slave raids that ripped families from the island, carrying them into darkness. In this telling, Easter Island was not simply undone by its own hand. It was crushed by forces from beyond the horizon. Yet, even these theories leave a silence. Walk among the fallen Maui, many lying face down as if slain, and the air feels thick with unanswered questions. Were they toppled in anger, or did the people themselves abandon them? Did they die with despair, or did they transform, blending into new cultural identities that still whisper in Polynesian traditions? What we know is this: by the 19th century, Rapa Nui was a shadow of its former self. A society that once carved giants was reduced to fragments of memory, and so Easter Island became a riddle island where ambition met fragility, where stone endured but people disappeared. The Maui still stand, but like ghosts. They remind us of a truth we resist. Greatness does not guarantee survival. The story of Easter Island is not only about disappearance, it is about reflection. The Maui are mirrors, staring not just at their people, but at us. We see in them the dangers of overreach, of believing our works will outlast the earth itself. The Rapa Nui believed their gods lived in stone. They poured their energy into raising giants, perhaps believing that as long as the Maui stood, their world would endure. And yet, when survival faltered, no statue could feed the hungry. No stone could shield them from famine or disease. The Maui endure, but the society that gave them meaning dissolved into silence. The lesson is haunting. Civilizations rise when they balance with nature, and they fall when that balance breaks. But the mystery lingers: did the Rapa Nui truly vanish, or did they transform? Today, the descendants of those people still live on Rapa Nui, carrying traditions, stories, and rituals that echo their ancestors. Yet, even they look at the Maui with awe, as though the true meaning was lost long ago. Imagine standing on the cliffs of Easter Island, the ocean roaring against rock, the wind sweeping across the statues' faces. You feel small, as though you are trespassing in the realm of giants. The Maui stare inward, toward the island, not outward to the sea. Perhaps they were reminders that survival comes not from the horizon, but from the land beneath your feet. And yet, the land failed them. Or did they fail the land? That question remains. Easter Island is not just an isolated tragedy, it is a universal warning. If a small island could fall from greatness, what of our world today? Larger, but no less fragile. The Maui watch us still, silent teachers carved in stone. They are not only the ghosts of Rapa Nui, they are our ghosts, waiting for us to listen. And so, from the Pacific, we journey across continents and back in time, to one of the oldest and most enigmatic civilizations in history. A civilization whose ruins whisper of order, innovation, and sudden disappearance. The Indus Valley. On the fertile floodplains of the Indus River, thousands of years ago, a civilization rose that would rival Egypt and Mesopotamia. Its people built cities of brick, straight-line streets, and drainage systems so advanced that some scholars call it the world's first urban planning. Harappa and Mohenjo-daro were not random clusters of houses. They were carefully designed grids, with wide avenues, public baths, and storage granaries, large enough to feed a nation. Imagine walking through these cities in their prime, merchants bargaining in open courtyards, children running through alleyways, priests tending fires, farmers bringing carts of grain to the city's heart. It was not just order, it was innovation. Their drainage systems ran beneath the streets, carrying waste away, a design far ahead of its time. Their bricks were uniform in size, a sign of standardized production. The Indus people left behind seals carved with animals and mysterious script symbols we cannot read, messages we cannot unlock. And yet, for all this brilliance, the Indus Valley civilization disappeared. By 1900 BCE, the cities were empty, the streets silent, the baths dry. What happened? Some suggest environmental change, the shifting of rivers that fed the land, leaving once fertile fields barren. Others believe floods, not droughts, may have drowned the cities, forcing people to scatter. Disease may have played its role, too, spreading in dense populations. And then there are theories of invasion, outsiders pressing against weakened cities. But here lies the deeper mystery. For all the evidence we have, we lack a voice. The Indus people wrote, but their script remains undeciphered. Without words, we cannot know what they feared, what they believed, or why they left. We can only walk their streets, touch their walls, and feel the silence of a civilization that vanished, without leaving its story. And that silence makes the Indus Valley one of history's most haunting riddles. Perhaps what unsettles us most about the Indus Valley is not its disappearance, but its silence. Other ancient cultures left text tablets, inscriptions, chronicles of kings and wars. The Indus people left only symbols, hundreds of small seals carved with images, bulls, elephants, tigers, fish. Beneath them, short lines of script, no more than a handful of characters. What do they mean? Are they names, prayers, trade records, or fragments of stories? No one knows. Without their voice, we can only reconstruct fragments of their lives. We see their order in the bricks, their engineering in the drains, their artistry in pottery, but we do not see their fears, their gods, their myths. And perhaps that silence is intentional. Imagine if a people's greatest story was never meant for outsiders, only for themselves. Now, as we walk their ruins, we become trespassers into a memory that was never ours to read. Mohenjo-daro's Great Bath still holds its mystery. Was it for ritual cleansing, for politics, or for something more spiritual? The platforms around it suggest ceremony, but the silence refuses to tell us. Then there are the skeletons found in the streets' bodies that appear to have fallen suddenly, as though struck by catastrophe. Were they victims of war, plague, or something more unimaginable? The theories multiply, but the truth slips away. And so, the Indus Valley remains a ghost, civilization its bones preserved, its heart silent. Unlike Egypt or Mesopotamia, where kings shouted their power into stone, the Indus whispered and then vanished. And perhaps that is why they haunt us most. For a civilization that planned so perfectly, that thrived for centuries, to dissolve into dust without explanation, it leaves us staring at the ruins, asking questions that may never be answered. Was the Indus Valley a collapse or a transformation? This is the question scholars wrestle with. Did the cities truly fall, or did their people simply move, blending into other cultures, their greatness diffused into the currents of history? Some evidence suggests continuity, that descendants carried their traditions forward, unseen, absorbed, into later South Asian societies. But the sudden emptiness of Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro resists this idea. It feels too sharp, too final. Standing in the ruins today, the silence feels heavy, like a city evacuated in haste. And yet, there is no single mark of disaster, no fire-blackened walls, no great battle, just absence. And that absence feeds the myth of vanishing. Perhaps the rivers betrayed them, shifting course and leaving one's rich lands dry. Perhaps disease spread silently, leaving families unable to sustain the city. Or perhaps, like so many others, the Indus Valley succumbed to the simple weight of time. Societies grow, flourish, and eventually fracture. But what makes the Indus different is that we cannot place their end in words. We cannot open a scroll or tablet and hear their last voices. We only walk their streets, touch their bricks, and imagine. In that silence, the Indus Valley becomes more than a lost civilization. It becomes a mirror, a reminder that even the most ordered societies can vanish, leaving nothing but stone and silence. And as we leave the floodplains of the Indus, we turn toward another vanished world, this time to a place even older, Catalyuk, one of the first great experiments in human settlement, where thousands lived roof to roof, only to fade into the long shadow of prehistory. Long before pyramids rose in Egypt or ziggurats towered over Mesopotamia, there was a place in Anatolia where thousands of people lived together in ways almost unimaginable for its time. Catalyuk, nearly 9,000 years old, is often called the world's first city, but it was unlike any city we know. Imagine thousands of mud brick houses packed tightly together, without streets, alleys, or courtyards. The rooftops themselves were the pathways. People climbed down ladders into their homes through openings in the roof, like entering a hidden world from above. From the sky, the city looked like a honeycomb, interconnected, compact, alive. Inside, the walls were painted with vivid murals. Hunters chasing deer, leopards, geometric patterns. Shrines filled with bull skulls and horns spoke of rituals we only half understand. It was a city of life, ritual, and mystery. And yet, for all its brilliance, Catalyuk eventually vanished. After more than 1,000 years of habitation, the people left. Why? Some point to climate change shifts that made farming difficult, forcing migration. Others believe population pressure strained resources, making life in such density unsustainable. But what makes Catalyuk haunting is not just its disappearance, it's the sense that it was an experiment, one of humanity's earliest attempts at urban life. And like many experiments, it may not have lasted. Walk its ruins today, and you'll see layers upon layers of homes built atop each other, generations rising like sediment. It feels both eternal and fragile, a reminder that even the first sparks of civilization can fade into silence. Life in Catalyuk was not ordinary, it was deeply bound with ritual. Archaeologists have uncovered something unsettling beneath the homes, burials. Families buried their dead beneath the floors of their houses, sometimes dozens of bodies layered together. Imagine sitting in your home, knowing your ancestors lay just beneath the floor, their bones woven into daily life. Some skeletons were adorned with ornaments, others painted with red ochre, suggesting rituals of remembrance or reverence. In some cases, skulls were removed and plastered, perhaps displayed, perhaps used in ceremonies. Death was not hidden, it was integrated, and the walls reflected this worldview. Murals depict vultures stripping flesh from human bodies, scenes that may symbolize death and renewal, or journeys into the afterlife. The bull skulls mounted on walls suggest worship of powerful animal spirits, symbols of fertility and strength. But were these religious shrines, or were they something else, mark of status, or symbols of communal identity? No one knows. The line between daily life and ritual in Catalyok seems blurred, as though every act carried spiritual weight. Yet, this intensity may have carried a cost. Living in such density, with burials beneath homes, could have spread disease. Combined with pressures on food and land, the society may have become too fragile to endure. And so, like the lives beneath its floors, the city itself was buried in time. But its walls, its art, its bones, these remain, whispering of a people who lived with one foot in the world of the living, and one foot in the world of the dead. When Catalyok was finally abandoned, it did not leave behind monuments or empires, it left silence. Yet, that silence may be the most haunting of all. This was not a kingdom with kings and armies. It was a community, an experiment in living together, one of the earliest we know. And its disappearance forces us to ask, why did it fail? Some argue climate shifts turned fertile lands into dust. Others suggest overpopulation strained resources beyond repair. Disease may have spread in the tightly packed homes, passed from family to family, hidden beneath the floors. Or perhaps it was something more subtler, shift in trade routes, or a cultural decision to scatter into smaller, less intense communities. Whatever the cause, Catalyok did not collapse with fire or war. It faded, its people left, and the honeycomb city fell silent. Today, its ruins lie buried under earth, a mound rising above the plains of Turkey, holding secrets we are only beginning to uncover. But one thing is certain, Catalyok shows us that urban life is fragile. Our first attempt at building a city ended not with triumph, but with disappearance. And perhaps that is the deeper lesson. It reminds us that even at the dawn of civilization, humans were already testing the boundaries of what it meant to live together, and sometimes the experiment failed. From the mud-brick honeycombs of Anatolia, we now move across the ocean to the deep jungles of Mesoamerica. Here, a civilization rose with pyramids and calendars, brilliance and blood. And like Catalyok, it too vanished into silence. The Maya, in the steaming jungles of Central America, a civilization thrived for over 2 millennia. The Maya. They were architects, astronomers, and mathematicians whose understanding of time was so advanced it still humbles modern science. Their cities, like Tikal, Palenque, and Copan, rose as stone giants amid green wilderness, crowned with pyramids that rivaled Egypt's in scale and ambition. They charted the heavens with astonishing precision, predicting solar eclipses, tracking Venus, and developing a calendar system more accurate than the one we use today. But the Maya were more than scholars, they were storytellers. They etched their history into stone stele, carved their myths into codices, and wove their gods into every corner of life. The world was cyclical for them, creation and destruction, order and chaos, endlessly repeating. Yet, in the 9th century, something broke that cycle. Cities were abandoned, temples overtaken by vines, and the once vast networks of trade and politics crumbled. This was no single event, no sudden collapse. It was a slow unraveling. Crops failed, wars ignited, dynasties fell, and in the end, the great cities fell silent. The Maya did not vanish completely. Their descendants live on today, but their empire, their unified brilliance, dissolved into the earth. What happened? Theories range from climate change to political fragmentation, from overpopulation to environmental exhaustion. Perhaps it was all of these, converging at once. The Maya remind us that even civilizations that measure the stars cannot always foresee their own decline. The Maya world was not only built on stone and science, it was built on belief and blood. To them, life itself was an offering. Kings pierced their flesh, queens drew blood with stingray spines, and captives had their hearts cut out on temple altars. These sacrifices were not acts of cruelty for cruelty's sake. They were cosmic. Necessity. The gods demanded nourishment, and in return, they kept the universe in balance. The pyramids were not just tombs or monuments, they were sacred mountains, conduits between the human world and the divine. Every ritual, every sacrifice, was a plea to keep the sun rising, the rains falling, the crops growing. But this belief system may also have sown seeds of collapse. As droughts grew longer and harvests failed, priests demanded more sacrifices, more blood to appease the gods. People began to lose faith. The sacred kings who once held divine authority found their power questioned. Rival cities turned on one another, wars tearing apart the bonds that once held the Maya together. At its peak, Maya society was an intricate web of religion, politics, and agriculture. But when one strand snapped, the entire web began to unravel. The sight of abandoned temples swallowed by jungles speaks to this truth. Gods that once demanded blood could not save their cities from silence. Imagine standing in the middle of Tikal at its peak, tens of thousands of people bustling. Smoke from cooking fires rising, the sound of drums and chants echoing from pyramids. Now imagine that same city a century later, silent vines crawling up once glorious walls, jaguars stalking through plazas where kings once ruled. That silence is the Maya's final legacy. Why did it come? Archaeologists have pieced together fragments, evidence of massive drought stretching for decades, signs of soil erosion from over-farming, carvings that speak of endless wars. Each crisis may have fed the other's drought, pushing famine, famine fueling rebellion, rebellion toppling kings. In the end, cities were abandoned, left to the forest. The people themselves did not vanish. They survived, scattered, their culture persisting in villages, languages, traditions. But the grandeur, the empire of cities and kings, was gone. For centuries, the ruins slept under green shadows, until explorers stumbled upon them again, astonished that such vast cities could exist in the wilderness. The Maya remind us of a truth that echoes through history. Even civilizations that command the heavens cannot always command the earth beneath their feet. As we leave the jungle temples behind, we travel north into the deserts of North America, where another people built cities of stone and vanished into mystery. The ancestral Pueblo. In the arid heart of the American Southwest, where the sun scorches, the mesas and water is more precious than gold. The ancestral Pueblans built a civilization of astonishing resilience. Long before Europeans arrived, these people carved homes into cliffs, stacked stone dwellings in canyons, and raised vast ceremonial structures called kivas. Their greatest city was Chaco Canyon, a place unlike any other in ancient North America. There, they built massive complexes, great houses, with hundreds of rooms, aligned so precisely with the sun and stars that archaeologists now compare them to observatories. Roads radiated from charcoal, stretching for miles across the desert, linking distant communities like arteries of stone. It was a civilization that should not have been possible in such a dry land, and yet, for centuries, it thrived. They farmed maize in desert soils, capturing every drop of rain through ingenious irrigation and terracing. They traded turquoise, pottery, and feathers across hundreds of miles, weaving a network of exchange that bound them to peoples far beyond their deserts. And yet, as with so many civilizations, this brilliance could not endure. By the late 1200s, the cities were abandoned, the cliff dwellings left silent. What could drive a people so skilled at survival to vanish? Perhaps the most haunting reminder of the ancestral Pueblones is found in Mesa Verde, where stone villages cling to sheer cliff faces, hidden like secret fortresses. These dwellings, spruce, treehouse, cliff palace, balcony house, were both homes and strongholds. From the safety of the cliffs, the Pueblones could watch the valleys below, secure from attack, their food stored in sealed rooms, their rituals performed in kivas sunk into the rock. Life here was not easy. Every day meant climbing steep paths to reach water, farming small patches of corn in dry soil, and enduring harsh winters on the mesa tops. But life here was also rich with meaning: ceremonial dances, intricate pottery, stories of ancestors carried in oral tradition. Then, in the span of a few generations, it ended. Archaeologists have uncovered signs of conflict-burned towers, skeletal remains that bear marks of violence. There are also signs of prolonged drought, stretching decades, when harvests failed and desperation grew. Did the people abandon their cliff homes in search of better lands, or did conflict tear their society apart? The answer remains elusive. What is certain is that by the 1300s, the great cliff dwellings were empty, left as silent monuments to a vanished way of life. Unlike some civilizations that vanish without a trace, the ancestral Pueblones left behind a story carved in the very land itself. Chacoconyan, Mesa Verde, Bandelier. These sites still whisper their secrets to those who listen. Petroglyphs etched into canyon walls depict spirals, animals, and celestial patterns. Perhaps maps of the stars, perhaps sacred journeys. Their roads, astonishingly straight, cut across the desert like deliberate lines of purpose, as if meant not only for travel, but for ritual. And though their great cities were abandoned, their people did not disappear entirely. Their descendants still live, the Hopi, Zuni, and other Pueblo peoples, keeping alive fragments of traditions that stretch back 1,000 years. The disappearance of the ancestral Pueblans was not an extinction, but a transformation. They remind us that civilizations are not always destroyed. They sometimes change, shift, adapt in ways that outsiders mistake for vanishing, and yet the question lingers: what drove them to leave the monumental homes they had built with such care? Was it climate, conflict, or something deeper? Spiritual decision to move on, guided by visions and prophecies we can no longer see. The desert keeps its silence, and the stone cities remain, timeless guardians of a mystery that endures. Now, we turn across the seas to the heart of the Pacific, where a remote island holds one of the greatest enigmas of all, the Rapa Nui of Easter Island. Far out in the Pacific, thousands of miles from any mainland, lies Rapa Nui, better known as Easter Island. It is one of the most isolated inhabited places on Earth, and yet, centuries ago, A thriving civilization flourished here. The islanders carved hundreds of colossal stone statues, the moai monuments that stand with their backs to the sea, staring inward as if watching over the living. Each moai could weigh dozens of tons, carved from volcanic rock and somehow transported across rough, hilly terrain without the use of wheels or large animals. These figures were more than art. They embodied ancestral spirits, guardians of the people, symbols of lineage and power. For centuries, the Rapa Nui lived in harmony with their island, cultivating crops like sweet potatoes and taro, raising chickens, fishing the surrounding waters. But the island was small, its resources finite, and the demands of monument building immense. The question lingers: why did they invest so much labor into statues rather than survival? Was it devotion, competition between clans, or something more sacred? This obsession with the moai remains central to the mystery of why Rapa Nui's great society eventually fell into decline. The decline of Rapa Nui has become a cautionary tale, often told as an ecological disaster. The island was once covered in towering palm forests, which provided wood for canoes, shelter, and perhaps the transportation of the moai. But over time, the trees were cut down, some say for moving statues, others for fuel, farming, or warfare. By the 1600s, the forest was gone. Without trees, the soil eroded, crops failed, and the islanders faced famine. Some accounts speak of social collapse, of rival clans toppling each other's statues in acts of vengeance, of desperate people turning to violence and even cannibalism in order to survive. Yet archaeologists now debate this narrative. Some evidence suggests the people adapted, shifting to new agricultural techniques like stone mulching to conserve water and soil. Others argue that European contact brought disease, slavery, and devastation far greater than ecological strain. In 1722, Dutch explorers first set foot on the island, finding a society still standing, still building, though fragile. Within a century, the population had plummeted, crushed by epidemics and raids. The great moai, once raised in reverence, were toppled, lying broken across the island like fallen gods. Today, the moai still stand, some restored, many half buried. In the earth, their enormous heads peering across the windswept landscape. They are reminders of both achievement and fragility, how a small, isolated people carved monuments so vast they defy imagination, yet also how quickly abundance can become ruin. But the story of Rapa Nui is not one of complete disappearance. The descendants of those ancient islanders still live there, carrying fragments of traditions and language that connect them to the past. The moai themselves may yet hold secrets. Unfinished statues lie in quarries, tools abandoned mid-carving, evidence of a people interrupted by some great crisis. Were the moai abandoned because the people lost faith, or because survival demanded a different focus? The island remains an enigma, its history shaped by devotion, struggle, and outside forces. To this day, Rapa Nui challenges us to question how civilizations rise and fall, how devotion to the sacred can both inspire and destroy. And as we look across the ocean, the story of vanished worlds does not end here. Our next journey will take us to the heart of the Andes, where an empire of stone, sun, and blood rose high above the clouds. The Inca. High in the Andes, where jagged peaks pierce the sky and valleys stretch into clouds, the Inca Empire emerged as one of the most formidable civilizations in the Americas. At its height in the 15th and early 16th centuries, it spanned thousands of miles along the spine of South America's stretching from modern-day Ecuador to Chile. Unlike many empires, the Inca rose without the wheel, without riding, and without large domesticated animals beyond the llama. Yet they built vast stone cities, masterfully engineered terraces, and roads that rivaled Rome's in scale. Central to their belief system was the sun god Inti, who granted life and legitimacy to the Sapa Inkatha, divine emperor. Every stone, every ritual, every conquest was tied to this celestial deity. Their capital, Cusco, was designed as the navel of the world, a sacred center from which power radiated. Here, golden temples glowed under the sun's light, and offerings of precious metals and human life alike were made to ensure balance with the gods. The Inca controlled their people through meta, a labor tax requiring citizens to work on imperial projects, from building fortresses to tending fields, binding the empire in service and order. This balance of faith, labor, and conquest created a society of astonishing achievement, yet one vulnerable to sudden collapse. What made the Inca truly extraordinary was their mastery of environment. In the unforgiving Andes, they sculpted the earth itself, carving out agricultural terraces that captured water and sunlight, allowing crops like potatoes, maize, and quinoa to flourish where nature resisted. Their stonework remains a marvel. Walls fitted so perfectly that not even a knife blade can slip between the stones, surviving earthquakes that toppled modern structures. Their road systems stretched over 25,000 miles, connecting mountain fortresses, valleys, and coasts. Runners Chaska carried messages in relay, ensuring swift communication across an empire without writing, using only quipu, knotted cords that encoded records in a language of strings. Yet beneath this brilliance ran a current of blood. The Inca expanded through conquest, demanding submission from neighboring tribes. Resistance was met with violence, populations relocated, and sacrifices made in the name of gods who demanded appeasement. Children, chosen for their purity, were offered in mountaintop ceremonies, their frozen bodies still found preserved in ice today. This empire was one of order and terror, sacred devotion and ruthless control. It seemed immovable, eternal, until fate brought invaders who would unravel it in a single generation. When Francisco Pizarro arrived in 1532 with fewer than 200 Spaniards, the Inca Empire was already weakened. A brutal civil war between two brothers, Atahualpa and Huascar, had torn the empire apart. Pizarro exploited this fracture, capturing Atahualpa during a meeting in Cajamarca. Despite a ransom of gold and silver so vast it filled entire rooms, the Spaniards executed the emperor, shattering the divine heart of Inca power, with steel, horses, and firearms technologies unknown to the Andes. The conquistadors cut through armies that numbered in the tens of thousands. But it was not weaponry alone that brought the Inca to their knees. It was disease. Smallpox, carried silently ahead of European conquest, swept through villages, killing millions before they ever saw a Spaniard. The empire, so tightly bound to divine order, could not survive the death of its god-king and the chaos that followed. Within decades, the great cities of Stone Cusco, Machu Picchu, Ollantaytambo were abandoned, looted, or repurposed under Spanish rule. Yet the Inca did not vanish entirely. Their bloodlines survive in the Quechua people. Their traditions echo in festivals and language. Their roads and terraces still shape Andean life, but the empire itself is gone, reduced to ruins. Perched high above the clouds, monuments to ambition, faith, and fragility. In the arid lands of the Arabian desert, where survival seemed impossible, the Nabateans rose to power as masters of both water and trade. From the 4th century BCE to the 1st century CE, they controlled caravan routes that carried frankincense, myrrh, spices, and silk across vast distances, linking Arabia, Mesopotamia, Egypt, and the Mediterranean world. Their capital, petrocked into rose-red cliffs of sandstone, remains one of the most stunning cities ever built. To outsiders, the Nabateans appeared mysterious, even elusive, living among barren rocks yet accumulating enormous wealth. They engineered complex water systems, cisterns, dams, and aqueducts that transformed desert into oasis. Merchants paid tribute to pass through their lands, and from this wealth rose temples, tombs, and theaters, all etched into stone that shimmered under desert sun. But their brilliance was not just architectural, it was strategic. They resisted empires, from the Seleucids to the Romans, maintaining autonomy by blending diplomacy with strength. To Greek and Roman travelers, Petra seemed almost a mirage, a hidden city guarded by cliffs, its people both prosperous and enigmatic. Yet for all their power, the Nabateans were a people who thrived not by conquest but by mastering terrain others could not endure. Petra was not merely a city, it was a statement of defiance against the desert. Approach through the sick and narrow gorge winding between towering cliffs, the city revealed itself suddenly, as if conjured from stone. The most iconic facade, Al-Khaznava, treasures stood like a temple from another world, its columns and sculptures blending Hellenistic influences with Eastern artistry. But Petra's beauty masked its practicality. Hidden beneath its grandeur were reservoirs, channels, and cisterns, enabling the Nabateans to collect every drop of scarce rainfall. This mastery of water secured life in a land where death waited. At every horizon, the city was also a spiritual hub, with temples to deities such as Dushtara, their chief god, and Al-Uza, a goddess linked to fertility. Rituals, sacrifices, and festivals bound the people together, echoing between red stone walls. Traders from Egypt, India, and Rome mingled in its markets, carrying scents of incense and echoes of foreign tongues. Yet Petra's grandeur also invited envy. Rome, expanding relentlessly, saw the Nabatean kingdom not as untouchable but as a jewel waiting to be claimed. The desert that had once protected the Nabateans could not shield them from an empire that spanned continents. In 106 CE, under Emperor Trajan, Rome annexed the Nabatean kingdom, transforming it into the province of Arabia, Petrea. The Nabateans, once rulers of the desert trade, were absorbed into a vast empire. At first, Petra flourished under Roman rule. New roads were built, amphitheaters expanded, and commerce continued. But Rome's conquest shifted trade routes toward the sea, bypassing the desert paths the Nabateans had controlled for centuries. Slowly, Petra's lifeblood drained away. Without caravans, wealth dwindled, and the city faded into silence. Earthquakes in the 4th and 6th centuries shattered much of its grandeur, and by the Middle Ages, Petra was abandoned, remembered only in whispers. For centuries, it was a lost city, hidden from the world until 1812, when Swiss explorer Johann Ludwig Burckhardt disguised himself as a pilgrim and revealed its ruins to the West. Today, Petra stands as one of the new 7 wonders of the world, majestic, haunting, yet hollow. The Nabateans themselves left behind no written chronicles, no detailed record of their lives. What remains is stone, carved with precision, weathered by time. Their civilization, once powerful, vanished into history, an empire swallowed by desert silence, their legacy surviving only in ruins that glow like fire at sunset. In 1587, more than 100 English settlers, men, women, and children, crossed the Atlantic in search of a new beginning. They landed on Roanoke Island, off the coast of present-day North Carolina, hoping to establish England's first permanent colony in the New World. They brought with them dreams of prosperity, religious freedom, and a foothold in a land of untamed wilderness. John White, the colony's governor, led the settlers with cautious optimism. But food supplies were limited, relations with local tribes were tense, and the threat of Spanish warships loomed over the Atlantic. Within weeks, White made a fateful decision. He would return to England for reinforcements and supplies, leaving behind his daughter, his granddaughter, Virginia the First, English child born in America, and more than 100 souls who depended on his return. Yet fate intervened. War with Spain delayed White's voyage for 3 long years. When he finally returned to Roanoke in 1590, he found the settlement abandoned, houses dismantled, no signs of struggle, no bodies, only a single word carved into a post remained: Croatoan. The lost colony had vanished, leaving behind silence, questions, and one of America's oldest mysteries. The disappearance of the Roanoke colonists has haunted historians for centuries. Some believe they starved, driven by desperation into the forests where they perished unseen. Others suggest they sought help from local tribes, such as the Croatan, possibly assimilating into their communities. Archaeological clues hint at this possibility, but no definitive evidence has been found. Another theory claims they attempted to sail back to England in makeshift boats, only to vanish at sea. Some whisper darker possibilities that hostile tribes or Spanish raiders wiped them out, leaving no trace but the carved word. Yet the lack of weapons, ruins, or graves leaves the puzzle unsolved. To this day, historians comb through artifacts, pottery, English tools, European-style weapons found in native settlements, trying to piece together fragments of truth. Virginia Dare, once a symbol of hope, became a ghostly figure in folklore, said to wander the woods as a white doe. Roanoke became less a colony and more a haunting question. How could more than 100 settlers vanish without leaving behind even a single witness? The lost colony remains suspended between history and legend, a riddle carved into wood, echoing across 4 centuries. Roanoke was more than a failed settlement, became a symbol of fragility, of how easily human ambition can be consumed by the unknown. Later English colonies, like Jamestown, succeeded where Roanoke failed. Yet the mystery endured, shaping American identity. The word Croatoan became a cipher for vanishing, whispered in poems, stories, and even supernatural lore. The colonists, once real and breathing, became mythic figures absorbed into tales of witches, curses, and restless spirits. To some, Roanoke's fate represents cultural merging, English settlers becoming one with indigenous tribes, erasing boundaries. To others, it embodies loss, a community swallowed by wilderness, by silence, by history itself. When modern archaeologists unearth fragment ceramics, tools, weapons, they are not just studying artifacts, they are chasing ghosts. Roanoke's story is not simply about what happened, it is about how the unknown itself endures, how absence can be as powerful as presence. The lost colony remains unsolved, not because evidence is lacking, but because the story has outgrown evidence. It has become legend, a reminder that even in the age of maps and empires, some corners of history remain dark. Roanoke vanished, but in its vanishing, it achieved a strange kind of immortality. Before Alexandria rose as Egypt's jewel of the Mediterranean, another city stood as its great port, Heracleion, known to the Greeks as the city of Heracles. Situated near the mouth of the Nile, it was a bustling hub of trade, culture, and religion from the 6th century BCE. Merchants from Greece, Phoenicia, and beyond passed through its harbors, bringing wealth and exotic goods. The city was also sacred ground. Here stood a grand temple to Ammon, where pharaohs once came to legitimize their rule, and where myths say Heracles himself first set foot in Egypt. Statues of gods towered above the harbor, golden barges glided through canals, and colossal stone guardians protected the city's gates. But Heracleion was more than a port. It was a crossroads of civilizations where Greek and Egyptian cultures intertwined. For centuries, it flourished, its wealth and beauty unmatched. Yet beneath the glitter of trade and temples lay a hidden danger. The city was built on unstable ground, vulnerable to the sea that gave it life, and in time, the same waters that fed Heracleion would consume it, erasing it from memory until it became nothing but a rumor of a city that once was. Sometime between the 2nd and 3rd centuries CE, catastrophe struck Heracleion. Scholars believe a series of natural disasters, earthquakes, tsunamis, and soil liquefaction caused entire sections of the city to collapse into the sea. Temples, houses, and markets slid beneath the waters, swallowed whole in a matter of moments. Survivors fled inland, abandoning their home to the depths. As centuries passed, silt and shifting sands buried Heracleion further. By the Middle Ages, it was gone from maps and memory, remembered only in texts by ancient writers who spoke of a once great port that had vanished. Skeptics dismissed it as legend, another Atlantis, a tale of hubris punished by the sea. For over 1,000 years, Heracleion was lost, its treasures lying silent beneath the waters of the Mediterranean. Unlike other ruins buried in desert or jungle, Heracleion was sealed in the ocean, its colossi, statues, and temples preserved in eerie stillness. What had been a city of trade and worship became a city of ghosts, entombed by the sea that had once given it life. In the year 2000, French archaeologist Frank Gaddio and his team made a discovery that shocked the world. After years of searching, they uncovered Heracleion, submerged beneath the waters of Abukir Bay near Alexandria. What emerged from the mud and darkness was extraordinary. Colossal statues of pharaohs, gods, and queens, some standing over 16 feet tall, temple ruins, inscriptions, jewelry, gold coins, and the remains of ships. Unlike most ruins weathered by time, Heracleion's treasures were astonishingly preserved, as though the city had been frozen in its final moments. Divers swam among toppled columns and statues, as if exploring a dreamscape where history and myth collided. The rediscovery of Heracleion proved that the city was no legend, had lived, thrived, and died. Yet its reappearance also carried a reminder. Civilizations, no matter how mighty, can vanish without warning, swallowed by forces beyond human control. Today, Heracleion is called Egypt's Atlantis, a city once erased, now reborn. It stands as both a wonder and a warning, a reminder that the sea remembers everything, and that time buries greatness only to unveil it again when the world is ready to listen.